professor, doctor? What's your preference?
You can call me Vladimir Golstein or professor, whatever.
All right. So Vladimir, um, I, I've been following your Facebook writing and some other places, also your writings for years now. And this piece you did the other day about the U.S. aid and Trojan horses of democracy caught my eye, and I wanted to talk about that. So maybe we could take a run through that and explain the thinking behind it for people.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. I once, probably several years ago, I went to the conference of Slavists I think it was held in Washington of all places. And I was giving a talk there about Cold War and its impact on literature, actually. And as I was researching the whole thing, the whole idea of Cold War is very, very, very powerful because unfortunately we still live in the shadow of the Cold War in a big way. And during the Cold War, what sort of United States started to do, and we can, I'm not saying it was bad; it was just part of the war, but they basically decided after the war was over that their new enemy is Russia. And Russia, not in terms of just military confrontation, but as one of the CIA operatives said it, they were fighting with Russia over the soul of Picasso. That's how they put it. So there were very many progressive leftists in France, Italy, Spain. After the war, they were still very sympathetic with, communist agenda, communist ideology. They were leftists. They still thought that the war was between this awful Nazi regime and kind of progressive, communist regime. And they were very sympathetic. And that was very dangerous for the United States. Thought that's not the way to go around it. We have to get these people, intellectuals, Picassos of the world, and all these writers in France, Sartre and his wife Simone de Beauvoir and others. We have to get them, in our camp. So that means they started a whole kind of cultural Cold War. And this cultural Cold War consists in creating endless amount of, like, France, cultural France, journals. There was a Paris Review. There was Encounter magazine. There was all these endless magazines, and it was like unbelievable amount of money channeled through CIA into things which don't you necessarily associate with CIA. The minute the CIA realizes that the Russians don't like abstract art, Americans didn't like abstract art either. They didn't like Jackson Pollock. They didn't like all these guys. But the minute they realized that Russians don't like them, and the way to get these lefty, modernist, creative people in the West to our side is to say, we have it. Look, we have Jackson Pollock. So we're going to have exhibition of Jackson Pollock all over. So they're bringing Jackson Pollock to Europe. They're bringing, jazz. Before that, there was all the screaming in jazz, blacks, Jews, communists. Now, no, jazz is our American thing, all to fight, this Cold War and to get the people of Europe on our side. So consequently, there was a very famous and important CIA operative called Tom Braden. And he made this kind of interview in '67 in the journal. And he began to confess, and he said that basically 2/3 of CIA operatives were done in the culture front, on the culture front, not through kind of, underhanded sort of murder or fighting another spy and fighting the spies. No, it was culture front. And that was kind of, I think, so when I began to see what's going on with you as a ID, USAID, it's really remind me of the same thing. It was the same kind of idea of having this kind of covert operations through the culture front. So they were like this kind of cultural hand of CIA operations. So that was done during the Cold War. And now, since the channels and methods and ways of going around it were there on the books. It was probably it wasn't that difficult for the United States to begin to resurrect it. So luckily there was this very big important front. So the government wouldn't be engaged in particular operations. They cannot engage in particular operations. But this body, which is set separate of the government, be it during the Cold War, there was Cultural Front. In our time, this US aid. These bodies can create other bodies. They can create Center of Democracy, Center for Freedom of Information, Center for for whatever, and they began to operate. And that's how they operate. They had giant amount of money. We're talking about, say, $40 billion a year, which is very, very big project. And they sort of run many programs. Some of them, again, there's nothing wrong in helping the poor. There's nothing wrong in exhibiting Jackson Pollock. There's nothing wrong in letting Louis Armstrong to play in Paris. But that was exactly idea of Trojan horse. That is, it's our gift to you. But with this gift, we kind of bring certain things, and United States was very successful in this Cold War. Eventually, a lot of intellectuals in Europe kind of turned away from Stalinist methods, from Stalinist sort of ideas toward United States. So the same thing was probably done here, and we see that was biggest success of the whole operation was definitely Ukraine. And now we learn how much money was poured in Ukraine precisely through this U.S. aid, how much money they were put there for publications, for organizing different institutions, and directing their policy. So as one commentator said, basically all the little institutions with this U.S. aid money, which began to function in Ukraine, they were instrumental in articulating red lines for Zelensky. Don't negotiate directly with Russians. Don't make peace with Russians. Do this policy. Follow this line and follow that. So that's how it sort of operated.
Yeah, and there's also a stick that goes along with those carrots. Excuse me. In each case, during the original Cold War, in the McCarthy period, you had HUAC hearings, you had blacklists, that people went to prison, some executed, as a matter of fact, Rosenberg, for example. And now you've had the banishings that have gone on in the media, and the blacklisting that went on. For example, we saw behind the curtains at Twitter after Musk took it over when it happened, and we learned that it happened at Facebook and at Google. The rigging of Google also, to favor certain opinions and et cetera. So that not only are you directing a narrative across a broad band of output, but anything contrary to that, you're tamping down, and interfering with to dominate the landscape. It's the same behavior basically, only with just different technology.
Absolutely, that's very disturbing, because it basically creates, we like, idea of listening to both sides. We like to make, very fair kind of assessments of situations. But, during the Cold War, we stopped doing it. There was, Fulbright, senator, who for a while was very much against kind of Russia. But then he realized, he made a very kind of a clear pronouncement. He said, at a certain moment, we all went crazy. We all went crazy. He said, we stopped listening to the other side. We stopped understanding Russian behavior. We began to attribute to Russia all the worst things. And their aggression, they want to take over the world, they're destroying this and that, without ever sort of entertaining, as he puts it, one's idea. Maybe their actions are caused by the fear of our aggression, by the desire to protect themselves. So that was this alternative views. The minute you try to articulate these alternative views, during Cold War, they would call people pinkos, communist sympathizers. Now what we hear, and that's what sort of was addressed to me, I ran away from Soviet Union, and they're going to tell me that I am a like Kremlin stooge only because I had to sort of read and think. This is kind of ridiculous, but that was the idea. Any alternative view is now Putin a puppet, Kremlin stooge, and so on. And so consequently, even if they would allow somebody, I've been interviewed on some British newspapers or whatever, but at the end there will be always some kind of editorial which will suggest that there is something. So even if they allow you 3 seconds, it will be blah blah blah. So that's how kind of you not only you create bullhorn for a particular opinion, you do all the best you can through algorithms. Of course, we're living in the modern world, through algorithms, through hiring independent fact checkers who will just basically, shut you down. And that's what they would do. So like any opposite opinion is just dismissed.
So not only does it have the impact on the culture of it being weaponized for the particular purpose, whatever that might be, it also has what you might call unintended consequences. You are changing the nature of the culture by putting these restrictions on it where it might otherwise organically grow. I can't imagine that that's a healthy development that's added to it. And is there any study of the history of this phenomenon that deals with that aspect of it?
There is a lot of fantastic stuff being done precisely about Cold War and writing and literature. There have been books. There's like 2 most prominent programs in literature was Iowa Writings Program and Stanford Writing Program. And these 2 institutions, they basically now it's like they produce so-called MFAs, Masters of Fine Arts. They produce writers, and Iowa is very, very famous. And everybody who is who in American literature went through either Iowa or Stanford. But what was going on there? It was precisely during Cold War, and any literature of United States, say of the 30s, Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath, Sinclair Lewis, all these kind of things which have to do with, underprivileged groups, suffering, workers, exploitation. All these things were kicked out. No, you don't do that. What you do individualistic exploration. You do like your fixations on some kind of sex things. So instead of a very serious kind of maybe social criticism and others, what was a model became a model for everyone is, say, Nabokov's Lolita. When you have an old guy fixated on a young girl and is doing this kind of things, and that would become, then as you do that, of course you write, you have linguistic puns, you have some kind of little observations, you have this and that, but the whole focus of literature representing, poor, representing suffering, eliciting sympathy was all gone. Everything, because any exploration of a group, of a community began to be associated either with Stalinist Russia or with Nazist collectivism. So slowly we have, on the one hand, we have focus on the individualism, which is more and more individualism, and the bad thing is collectivism, totalitarianism, and this all bad, and how somehow Russia, who fought Germany, began to be associated with Germany. It all became totalitarianism. So if you want to talk about some kind of anything which deals with group, with that's the kind of social environment, you right away push it into this kind of totalitarianism, kind of camp. And when you come and start studying literature, no, you cannot do that. You have to concentrate on some kind of individual search, individual quest of some kind of strange obsessions. In what we have in fine art was a similar thing. Rather than anything which is related to representing a person within his her environment and maybe hostile environment was out, what we've been pushed abstract art. something which is kind of doesn't call for like a change for social thing. So, it was really had a powerful, impact on culture. And, there is nothing wrong in experimenting, in doing verbal, visual, or any kind of experiment. But when, I remember I was teaching a class back at Yale, and my colleague called abstract art capitalist realism. There was a socialist realism in Russia, when you describe the revolutionary consciousness growing up, and there's capitalist realism. It's like abstract art, because it was like more or less the same side of phenomena. And we all know that too much of a good thing is too much, but that's what's happened.
It's interesting. You just finished a book on the conflict of generations in Russia. It's an interesting place to study that. We've had such a huge turnaround in the, in the system there since the 80s, 90s, or whatever forward, and at the same time taking place in a culture that's almost ancient. It's has a long history and very fully developed culture. It's like irresistible force and immovable object almost, with a transition in the midst of it. What lessons do you think you can cull from what you've been studying that might pertain to this larger question?
Well, a lot of lessons. First of all, I observed it is indeed a very big pattern of Russian culture, is this very, very big oscillations. That, there would be like, very traditional Russian culture, going to the churches, kissing the icons, and, looking inward. And then Peter the Great says, no, this is all nonsense. We have to learn from the West. I'm going to shave your beards. I'm going to change your clothes. You're not going to waste your time on going to churches. You're going to build boats. You're going to do this. So it was like totally drastic orientation. And young people will start looking down at their parents. Oh, you're just like a dinosaur. Nobody wants to listen to you. So, okay, we go forward, and then, another kind of change. That's why Turgenev writes The Fathers and Sons, his kind of novel. All of a sudden, the young people dislike Tsarist regime. It's all based on serfdom. We need to sort of turn it around. We don't recognize the culture of Pushkin, because Pushkin was a serf holder. It reminds us of what's going on in this country, when we just dismiss everything. So, okay, that was it. Then we have a revolution. Again, everything related to ancient regime is out. We have communism, we ban religion, we ban this. Move forward, everything Soviet is now is dismissed. So now we just move, a certain moment when during 90s, 2000s, there was this absolutely mad capitalism in Russia. And I know a lot of Americans who went there and they think, oh, finally we have a Wild West, which we'd never experienced back in the United States, because we have a lot of regulations, we have a lot of rules, we have a lot of bodies monitoring. In Russia, it was like free for all, and a lot of people made a lot of money. But what I kind of observed this, and I learned from that basically every time Russians are kind of throwing the baby with the bathwater. There is a lot of valuable things in others. It doesn't mean that we are slaves to the past. We definitely have to move through evolution, but that's what sort of smart people would say. There should be evolutions rather than a kind of drastic revolution. And I think, that what I learned about it is precisely this kind of need dangerous need of young Turks to dismiss everything what was, in the past. And this is my examples of Cold War are very, very telling. So all of a sudden, this great writing of the, Dos Passos, it is, Steinbeck, even, Hemingway actually changed his writing. He began to write in a different way. So all of a sudden, this kind of fixation on just individualism, modernism, individual search, individual fixation, sexuality became like, center thing, which they were not there. So like, I don't like these oscillations, this pendulum oscillation. And in that sense, actually, both Russia and America are very, very similar, because they like this pendulum oscillations between the extremes. Of course, we have Here, thank God, we have certain institutions which try to moderate it, constitutions and the court or whatever. Russians usually don't have it, so that they go much wider. But these are all kind of pretty disturbing things.
It's very interesting. It's a very interesting time to see this stuff developing here too. Thank you very much, Vladimir. Appreciate your time, and look forward to the book. When is it coming out?
My book is coming out actually in June. I already went through 2 sets of proofs, so it's kind of ready to go.
You got a working title, or?
Yeah, I think I have a working title. I think it's called Fathers and Sons, Turgenev's Theme in Russian Culture and Literature. Fathers and Sons.
We'll keep an eye out for it. Thank you
All
very much.
right. Thank you very much, Don. Appreciate it, and all the best.
Same.